Hey everyone, in today's video we're going to have a look at sustainability and environmental concerns in relating to the exam. So what you need to know first of all is what the 6 R's are, how they can be applied to design and manufacture of an actual physical product, the different labelling that can appear on products and what they mean, what a carbon footprint is, and be able to give examples of carbon footprint of a real life product, and then you also need to be able to give real life examples of how companies are aiming to reduce their environmental impact. So some of it will be over what you've done before at GCSE, I imagine. So I imagine 6 R's is something you're familiar with, and some of it may be a little bit more newer to you. So first of all, earth resources such as oil, timber, metal ores are all being consumed at quite a very, very quick rate. Timbers can be replaced, but not quick enough at the current rate of consumption. The process of converting raw materials such as things like crude oil into products consumes a huge amount of energy, which creates pollution and CO2 emissions, and those of course are linked to things like global warming. The warming of the atmosphere creates unnatural changes in weather patterns, which can have devastating effects. Now obviously you've got things like melting of the ice caps, that you can tell in this country as well, things like very much warmer winters happening a lot later, so that you can see these effects happening as we're in our time we're living now. And then when products are disposed of, most of the time they often just go to a landfill, which wastes resources and creates other environmental hazards. So they're just literally dug a hole, dumped in there, then they will release gases, and that does a lot more damage to the environment and the ground around it as well. So first of all, 6 R's. So this is one you probably are familiar with a little bit. So things like rethink, refuse, reduce, reuse, recycle, replace. And these are sort of the steps that designers are asked to use and then consumers are asked to use to think about when it comes to new products or different products, do you really need it? Can you avoid using things in different ways? Can you repair something instead of getting a brand new thing? Can you recycle it? So things like reuse water bottles rather than single-use plastic water bottles. Can you have like a refillable bottle that way? Recycle, quite simply, if it can be recycled, can you? Reduce, so things like say packaging. Can you reduce the amount of packaging actually physically used? So you do see occasionally clips where people are like supermarkets are packaging like fruit that's got a protective coat on it already, like the skin of it, in plastic packets when really it doesn't need it because it's protecting it, and those sort of things. So recycling is a very loose term. There are actually 3 levels to recycling. So the first one is primary recycling. So this is the use of functioning second-hand products that you're done with, and you take it to charity shops, resell it on eBay, Gumtree, that sort of thing, and that will come under of the 6 R's. That sort of covers like reuse, because you're done with it, but necessarily it still works. I'll donate it, I'll sell it on, someone else can have it instead. Secondary recycling is the end of the product's life. The materials are recycled to make different products. So that might be boat sails make seats, plastic drinks bottles can make plant pots, that type of thing. And then territory recycling is where you completely break down a product with a chemical process, e.g. polymer plastic bottles shredded and spun into fibres, which can then make like fleece, textiles, clothing, like the old school blazers that you may have worn in secondary school, those types of things. So that covers the basics like the 6 R's and recycling. So there are some legislation and rules in place that kind of encourage being more environmentally aware, and that's for both the consumers, as in the people that use the product, and also those that manufacture and sell the product. So you've got eco-labelling, which is this symbol here that you see, which is like got the European Union logo with the stars and the little flower. So that's a voluntary scheme. It came into place in 1993, and it's to be labelled. This symbol is put on it so it can stand amongst competition in terms of having the least negative effect on the environment over its entire life cycle. So the entire life cycle is when from raw materials, extraction, manufacture, being used, and then being disposed of and being recycled at the end of it. That's what's called the product life cycle. And this is sort of like a status symbol. You don't have to go for this scheme, but if you do, you've got to meet these certain standards, and it shows consumers that actually it's a very good product for the environment. It's not having an adverse effect. And some people might not care, because you don't need to care, but nowadays a lot of people are very socially aware. They want to make sure they are having less and less of a negative effect on the environment, because it's becoming more apparent that it's a more important thing. You've then got the Packaging Directive. So this is the EU Packaging Directive that came into place in 2000, or it was amended, sorry, in 2004. So this sets targets for the reduction of packaging waste by means of designing out waste in initial packaging design, either recycling it or reusing it. It also sets limits on the amount of toxic material used in packaging. So have a think. I'm sure you can probably imagine you've ordered something before, either on Amazon or you've bought it in a shop, and it comes in this huge amount of packaging. You open it up and the thing inside it doesn't even take up like a third of the space of the packaging. That's the sort of thing that they're trying to look to get rid of. So not having excess packaging, making sure the packaging you've got, because you need to have it, can then be reused again for something else, or it can be recycled okay as well. Then you've got the Energy Labelling Directive, which is what this symbol down at the bottom right is. So you may see that going A to G. We've talked about this a little bit in previous theories as well. So this was introduced in 1996. So this goes on all electrical appliances like refrigerators, washing machines, those sort of things. So they're labelled A to G to indicate how energy efficient they are. It also helps phase out inefficient appliances by discouraging people to buy them. So you'll find one of these at the front of our tech block, which is actually, I think we're at a G actually, which is really, really bad, but because it's quite an old building. But the reason why it matters for a consumer, if you buy a fridge and it is an A, and they actually do have like an A plus now as well, it's going to be very energy efficient, so it's going to save you money. Whereas if you have two fridges, one's an A and one's an F, your electricity bill will be higher at the end of the month if it's an F, because it's a lot of wasted energy has gone into using it. So for you, it's going to save you money as well. You've then got the End of Life Directive. So this aims to encourage the reuse and recycling of waste from vehicles when they reach the end of life, restricts the use of toxic material in new cars, and requires manufacturers to clearly label plastic parts, making recycling more convenient. Because what you've got to remember is when it comes to disposing and getting rid of products at the end of their life, it's all about the convenience. That's why now you should be making things so it's easier to take them apart, so not having things permanently fitted in place, not permanently welded, like fixings you can't get to. Apple have been really bad at that in the past, and in fact still are, is they make it so their phones are near impossible to actually take apart to recycle properly. They actually fit it in place, and that's to stop people from repairing it so that they have to buy a new phone, and they've actually got into a lot of trouble for that in the past. Again, we've seen this before, the Waste, Electrical and Electronic Equipment Directive, the WE Directive. So the aim of this encourages the development of electronic products that can be dismantled and the parts reused and recycled. So much like we talked about end of life. So the idea that you're making something so it's easier to take apart, so casing can take apart, components can be taken out. So it might be that some of the components can't be recycled, but the casing can. All right, can we make it so the components can be removed, and then that casing, which might be a thermoplastic, okay, fine, we can take that can be recycled, no problem. It also enforces manufacturers to inform through their products that the electronic device should not be discarded, but instead taken to a collection point that deals with that. Typically, they'll be in most like tips that you have in councils, but it should be that they can't just be put in bins because they can be quite dangerous. And then we've got restriction of hazardous substances, the RoHS. So that bans the use of some hazardous materials and chemicals such as lead, mercury, cadmium, and electronic components. So this is to safeguard human health with electrical equipment is disposed of and recycled. So we've definitely seen the WE Directive and the RoHS Directive before in previous theories. End of Vehicle Directive, or End of Life for the Vehicle Directive, sorry, we haven't, that's new to this theory. But you're starting to see some of these coming up on more different topics. So in terms of design approaches that manufacturers and designers can take with products, there's a few different ways of doing it. So the first one is green design. So this focuses only a couple of areas of the product's life cycle. So modifications such as conserving materials through using recycled material in the manufacture of the product, or by conserving energy in the use of the product, are examples of green approach. You got eco design. So this approach goes further than so this is like green design is like the entry level. Like we're doing a little bit for the environment, but we're not doing a huge amount. So the next level will be eco design. So this approach goes further than green design. The designers and manufacturers will collaborate to reduce the environmental impact of the products through its entire life cycle, from the extraction of raw materials all the way to disposal. So remember that whole life cycle term is from the raw materials where you extract them from the ground or wherever it may be, into that whole manufacturing process to the whole point of being used all the way to disposal, whether it is landfill or it's recycled again. That's the whole term of life cycle. So eco-design aims to tackle environmental concerns such as materials consumption, fossil fuel consumption and pollution and toxic waste. When developing a new product, an eco-design oriented company would consider aspects such as their selection of materials, reducing the amount of materials that they need, reducing the impact the product would have during use, and making sure that it is recycled with it's easy to recycle at the end of its life. You've then got sustainable design. So this the sustainable approach to designing a product will be more in-depth than eco-design, as it will consider the bigger picture such as socio-economic issues. That can include things like the welfare and safety of workers, fair trade schemes, not using sweatshops in like China and places like that. Again, I'll use Apple because they are known for being notoriously quite loose with their morals, shall we say. Don't sue me, please, Apple. And the same with like Nike and Adidas, like that. It is quite bad press and also just morally poor to outsource because it's cheaper, because you can get cheaper workers in sweatshops. They have worse conditions. Sustainable design is just trying to combat all that and make sure things are done locally, or at least on a national level where you can do it and people are getting a fair price for what they're doing. So more resources are invested in analysing the function of a product and seeking more environmentally friendly methods of achieving the same function. So it might be something that already exists, and then a few years later there might be introduction of new materials and new manufacturing methods, and you might say, okay, actually we've got this already, how might we change it now? We've got these new manufacturing methods, we can make this material into the product in a much better way, let's change that up. Now, some of these symbols you will see before. Obviously, we've gone through the polymer recycling codes before, from 1 to 7, 1 obviously being the best one, so that is easy to recycle, all the way up to 7 where it won't be recycled. And you will see things like, obviously, water bottles that you have, the single-use ones that we shouldn't be using, will have PET on them. So like, those little triangles, they're always like moulded into the plastic products. A few that you might not see before, so things that you'll see on like glass, aluminium, steel. And the general term for the triangle is just called the Mobius loop, not just the recycling symbol. So when you're doing it in the exam, do refer to it as the Mobius loop, not the recycling symbol. And all of these symbols, the whole point of these is that so at the recycling centre, it's much easier to sort them out. So carbon footprint, again, is a bit of a general term, but what that really comes to is, if you talk about the product life cycle from raw materials all the way through to disposal, the carbon footprint is all of the energy that is used in that entire process. So from extracting the raw materials, from transporting the raw materials from where they are to a factory, to the amount of energy used in the factory to turn the raw materials into a workable material. So you take like oil, extracting the oil, transporting the oil to where it needs to go, refining it and making it into a plastic, then taking that and transporting that and turning that into another product, then taking that product and then transporting it to another country, whether that might be either in lorries, it might be in planes, all the way through to it being taken home, to then it being used for X amount of years, whatever this product may be, and then to be disposed of. The carbon footprint covers all of that. So all the energy used to make the product, all the energy to use the product, so if it's like an electronic product and you're using it in your house, to it being disposed of. So carbon footprint covers all of that. And some products have got really good carbon footprints. So for example, in this country, if you're buying a product and it's locally sourced, and you know that the raw materials have come from this country, it's got quite a small carbon footprint. But there are some products, whether they're food products or whatever it may be, they've got really bad carbon footprint. So if you get anything from like China, obviously that's flown quite a long way, so that's going to have a bigger carbon footprint. So you do find now sometimes on products they do say what that sort of carbon footprint is, because more people are becoming more and more conscious of it and want to make those right choices. So landfills. I'm sure everyone knows what the term landfill is, but essentially it is just a giant hole in the ground that you just keep throwing things into it. So once a landfill is full, they'll cover it with soil. There's limited oxygen and water available, so this creates like this anaerobic conditions, and the rate of degradation of the materials becomes extremely slow because it needs the air, it needs the moisture to break down. So once you fill it with, like, block all that off, that's why it will stay there for hundreds, thousands of years. There is even incidents of discarded food, which would break down quite easily, being there for several years after it's been thrown away because it hasn't had access to that oxygen, that water, or that moisture to let it break down. So eco-design, so things like the use of material which have low impact on the environment, reduce the amount of materials needed, reduce the impact of distribution, reduce the energy consumption and use, optimization of product lifetime, and optimizing of end of life. Here are a few examples of what has happened in relation to eco design. So things like reducing the size of the packaging to a minimum. So no longer, so take like TV, no longer having the massive box that it comes with, having a much more self-contained piece of packaging. Packaging should use rectangular shapes to make transportation efficient, therefore reducing the carbon footprint emitted by the transport vehicles. So that's an interesting one. There's a reason why most packaging is really simple shapes, because the idea is that you can stack more of them together, so you can fit more of them in the truck. That's the same with, if you take like Coke cans, like fizzy drink cans. The reason they're all stackable is that you can fit more of them, they're all stacked together easily, you can fit more of them in a truck. So instead of maybe having to take 3 trucks in because they're all really weird shapes, you can fit it all in one. So you're actually only using the energy for one truck. The use of LDPE cushions. So some companies use a lot. Basically, the idea was this was to reduce the styrofoam padding, or like the little peanuts that you used to get inside packaging to stop it from rattling around. You may see those cushions. Sometimes you like stab them with like a knife to like pop them to throw them away. But LDPE can be recycled really easily. It doesn't increase the weight at all, and it still does the same job. It still stops everything from rattling around. So, and there's also making sure easily making material out of cardboard, which is easy to be recycled, so not necessarily having loads of coating on it so it can't be recycled. Reducing the number of materials used, so not mixing more than one material together. Then avoiding oil-based plastics if possible, or substitute with suitable biodegradable plastics, which we have covered in a previous theory. So, general developments that have taken place. So we've just talked about the LDPE cushions. You also got obviously now things like LEDs. So now most new like work done in houses and like kitchens and bathrooms and those sort of things, you have LEDs in them, and what they will do, they use a lot less energy to actually turn on. So they also use a lot less toxic material as well, because it has a much longer life. So not only is it using less energy and it has less toxic material in it, LEDs don't need to be replaced. Because they don't use much energy, they don't burn out as fast, which is why in most kitchens and most bathrooms, when you have the LED lights, I mean, I can't remember the last time I had to change the bulb in my kitchen or my bathroom. And then your energy rating, so the energy labelling directives, making sure everything's on there nice and clearly. Now, there is one article I want to show you as well. So if we go, so this was 2019, so about a year ago. Just over a year ago. So Waitrose, now other shops have started doing this as well. So they've started, rather than, obviously we have things like the tax for like shopping bags at Tesco, like 5p bags and that sort of thing. Is supposed to encourage to bring your own bags, but also certain things that you can refill, like coffee and cereal, that sort of thing. They're encouraging people to bring in like jars and those sort of things that you can weigh. So obviously you can weigh your jar, see how much it is, and then you can fill it with seeds, fruit, whatever, and then you weigh it again, and then you know how much you've got, and then you can still charge them that way. But the idea is trying to encourage you to have less waste. So this is where companies are actively trying to make sure that they're not having as much of a negative effect on the environment. So you can start to see it more and more now. So this was like the first one. Waitrose was one of the first, but you definitely see a few more companies now are starting to do that. Okay, so 5 questions. Can you pause the video, have a go and answer them, and then unpause the video for me? Okay, so what are the 3 types of recycling? Give an example of each. So primary, using functioning products, donating to charity shops, eBay, that type of thing. Secondary, the material is being broken down and reused. And tertiary, the material is being chemically broken down and turned into something completely different. So name a product and explain how it can be redesigned using the 6 R's to reduce the environmental impact. So that'd be like 8 points. So typically you'd use things maybe like a TV remote, making sure it's easy to be taken apart, make sure the materials can be recycled nice and easily, making sure that it can be repaired if it needs to be, those sort of things. So you're looking for like 8 key points with that one. So any product you could pick, just make sure it's something you can think enough points about. How could retailers reduce the packaging that they are selling? Give real-life examples to back up your answer. So things like no excess packaging on fruit, like bananas, oranges, apples. Refillable, like coffee jars. So you see Nescafe have that now, where you have like a glass jar, but then you can go get the refill pouches that you can just get. And I think it's like 95% less packaging is what their claim is, something like that. Name 3 different renewable energy sources. So you got wind, hydro, solar, tidal, biomass, and geothermal. And then what is a circular economy and why is it important? So circular economy, so that's an approach that anticipates and designs for biological and technical nutrients to be continuously reused at the same quantity. The idea is it reduces waste, it avoids pollution and that type of thing. So that is environmental and sustainable issues. If you've got any questions, please send me an email or send me a message on Teams and I'll get back to you.